I often get phone calls asking if Virginia has such a thing as a legal separation. And unfortunately, we don't, not technically. You can be separated legally from your spouse, however, and there are really two mechanisms by which that can occur. First of all, we do have a form of divorce, an intermediate divorce known as a divorce from bed and board. A divorce from bed and board can be brought only on fault grounds, cruelty or reasonable apprehension of bodily harm, or desertion and abandonment. And it can be brought immediately by a spouse. So it's often used more as a tactical procedure to get a case into court instead of having to wait the required period for a full and final divorce. A divorce from bed and board, if the parties go through with it, does not terminate the marriage. It simply is a legal recognition that the parties are now permanently and legally separated from one another in their person and their property. They're no longer sharing the same table and bed. The parties are not free to remarry if they have a divorce from bed and board. But it is an intermediate decree. The parties can have that decree revoked and go live back together again, or they can move to have the grounds for divorce. If the decree hasn't been entered, they can move to have the grounds for divorce amended to no-fault grounds after they've lived separate and apart for at least a year and be granted a full and final divorce. The second thing that approximates a legal separation in Virginia is being separated with a written agreement. Virginia has a premarital separation agreement act which validates premarital agreements and marital agreements. And you may see several different descriptive terms for the written agreement that spouses enter into if they do separate and want to have a written contract. It may be called a separation agreement, it may be called a property settlement agreement, it may be called a stipulation and agreement. The important thing is that the parties are married at the time and they have a written agreement between them. The parties can address spousal support, they can address the division of their property, they can address the allocation of their debts. They can also address the custody and visitation and support of their children, with the caveat that ultimately a legal contract between the parties is not binding on a judge who may do what's in the best interests of the children regardless of what the parents have agreed to. Now, normally the parents know what's in the best interest of the children, and normally a judge will accept what the parties have agreed to in a contract as being in the best interests of the children, but that's not necessarily a guaranteed right. You should discuss with your attorney what the approximation of a legal separation in Virginia might be.